to order, and if you would conduct the roll.
Director Jim Brown.
Here.
Director Larry Stransky.
Yes.
Director Richie Wasserman.
Here.
Director Tess Albin-Smith.
Yes, here.
Director John Haschak.
Here.
Director Brad Bedham on the phone.
Here.
Director Michael Carter.
Here.
And Chair Dan Jurdy.
Here.
Right.
Okay, thank you. We're going to immediately convene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, recess as that, and then reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee, where Caltrans votes on our agenda items. The next item on our agenda is public expression. Participation is welcome at our meetings. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person and not more than 10 minutes per subject so that everyone can be heard. Public expression is a time limited to matters that are under our jurisdiction but are not necessarily already on our agenda. No action will be taken on the non-agenda items. You will also have a chance to speak on items that are on our agenda as well. Would anyone like to speak on a non-agenda item at this time? Okay.
That lady had her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Come on up.
Chair Jurdy and members of the MCOG board, my name is Diana Clark and I represent the Ucae Senior Center. Thank you. Yesterday I received an email from Richard Baker, who's the director of the Willett Senior Center. He can't be here today because he's on vacation, but he asked me to share a couple of comments from him and from the Willett Senior Center. His comments are as follows. Nafili Barrett and Janet Orth have been professional and knowledgeable, and their experience has been reassuring. I especially appreciate them hosting the Senior Center's Directors Workshop and allowing us to voice our concerns. I was especially hopeful to find that their views coincide with ours regarding the current arrangement that the senior centers have contracting with MTA to provide transportation for seniors and the disabled throughout Mendocino County, and that this arrangement remain in effect because it is the best option available. I would like to follow Richard's comments because I also am very appreciative of all of the efforts that Nafili Barrett and Janet Orth have given to the senior centers in hosting the workshop on September 17th, and also to the Ucae Senior Center helping us with our Caltrans 5310 application, because this was the first year that we had done it online. Their expertise and guidance and assistance was invaluable in enabling us to get it submitted on time. So on behalf of our senior center and all the senior centers, we're so appreciative of everything that you've done to be supportive of the senior centers in their working relationship with MTA and also with the other issues that we have to make sure that we provide the best transportation possible for seniors and the disabled in our county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments on non-agenda items? Okay, not seeing any. Next thing on our agenda is a public hearing. It's potential adoption of Resolution 2019 approving a Federal Transit Administration FTA Section 5310 grant application for a regional priority list. Do we have proper documentation to proceed with the public hearing, or do we have anything we have to declare?
This public hearing actually doesn't need to be noticed.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Before we go ahead and open that, I was just going to give you a brief overview of the staff report. So this year we had 4 applicants: Ucae Senior Center, Coastal Seniors, MTA, and Consolidated Tribal Health. Of those, the Ucae Senior Center was the only one to submit for a traditional application, which is, vehicle replacement or just acquisition of a vehicle. The others are for operational funds. And so, unfortunately, scoring had to be turned into Caltrans prior to this meeting. And so, I guess whether the board likes it or not, there's a score here for their application. They scored an 85, which is the most that they were able to score based on their performance metrics. And with that, I guess we can go ahead and open up the public hearing, unless anyone has any questions.
If there are no questions, we'll open the public hearing at 1:40.
I don't see anyone.
Do we have any members of the public who would like to comment on this public hearing item? This is for the regional priority list for the Federal Transit Administration grant. Okay. Seeing none, I guess we'll close the public
Yep.
hearing at 1:41.
All right. Last thing is the resolution.
I will move that we adopt the resolution.
I will second.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members? We have a motion on the table. I believe this will be a roll call vote. Board member Hashak.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, the three entities that were interested, the Mendocino Transit Authority, Coastal Seniors, and Consolidated Tribal Health, and we didn't score their applications. So what does that mean
So
for them?
when you apply for operational funds, it's considered what they call an expanded application rather than a traditional, and Caltrans takes care of those. They score those on their own. We don't have anything to do with that scoring.
Okay, so in no way, it doesn't jeopardize
No,
any
not
of
at all.
their, okay.
No, that was, so up until a few years ago, the FTA 5310 program was just for vehicle and equipment purchases and replacement. A few years ago, some other programs got combined with the 5310, and so they created this expanded program which allows for operating mobility management and that sort of thing. And so Caltrans scores those independently, and RTPAs still score only the vehicle and equipment requests. And the state actually scores the vehicle and equipment requests also. Then they take their scores and our scores and compare them sort of as a checks and balances system. So if there's a big discrepancy between the scores, then they contact us and try to find out what the problem is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I believe this requires a roll call vote.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Stransky?
Yes.
Director Wasserman? Director Albin Smith?
Yes.
Director Haschak?
Yes.
Director Medham?
Yes.
Director Carter?
Yes.
Director Dirty?
Yes. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the presentation of the Gualala Downtown Streetscape Project update and working group report. Frank Demling, Caltrans.
Yeah, I'll give a little background to start with. So MCOG has for many years been involved in planning efforts in the Gualala community. Several months ago, the MCOG board had an opportunity to tour the South Coast area and walk through the town of Gualala and kind of see the conditions currently through downtown where the project is planned. So Caltrans has been working on the environmental phase of the downtown streetscape project for the last couple of years and has recently released a draft environmental document. That draft environmental document, once it was available for public comment, sort of started a new round of public interest in the Gualala community. And based on the amount of comment received, it became clear that additional work was needed in the Gualala community to determine what project elements were going to be supported by the community and fit the purpose and need of the project. So a working group was formed. That working group has now met twice, and a very well-attended community meeting was held last week with well over 100 people. There were 100 handouts, and they ran out quickly, so I would say, 150 people maybe?
I think we counted 175 approximately.
Really? Wow. So 175 people. So very well attended, and fortunately, I would say 3/4 of the room was in agreement about the best approach to take for the project. So Frank is going to share more of the details of what's planned, but Caltrans is wrapping up the environmental component. We'll be ready to move on to design coming up in the next few months.
Right. The environmental document and the project report are scheduled to be released in February of 2020. We still have quite a bit of work to do ahead of us because of this change in the streetscape width and what would be included as far as the typical section. As most of you probably know, the draft environmental document originally proposed configuring State Route 1 into two 11-foot traveled lanes, a 12-foot wide two-way left turn lane, two 5-foot wide Class 2 bicycle lanes, and 6-foot wide sidewalks that would be winding within an 8-foot wide right-of-way strip on both sides, which would result in a 60-foot wide streetscape. Now, during the circulation of the draft environmental document, Caltrans did receive more than 80 letters commenting on the project, with the clear majority opposed to any streetscape plan that would result in the removal of on-street parking because of the negative impact it would have on local businesses. Additionally, a Change.org petition was initiated and resulted in approximately 1,200 signatures opposing any streetscape plan that would result in the removal of on-street parking, again because of the negative impact that it would have on local businesses. So in response to the community's concerns, MCOG and Caltrans worked with the Gualala community to form a working group made up of local business owners, property owners, residents, to find a compromise to the project alternative proposed in the draft environmental document. This collaborative working group was assigned the specific task of providing recommendations to modify one or both of the current project alternatives in response to concerns by many in the community over the loss of on-street parking. Although Caltrans received numerous emails from community members from Sea Ranch and Walla indicated they did not want to see any changes in Walla, most community members were looking for a compromise to ensure that the project benefits would benefit the entire community, could be funded and built. So the working group mostly supported a 64-foot wide streetscape width, which would be sufficient to retain on-street parking on both sides of the highway and allow the option in the future to restripe the highway for a continuous two-way left turn lane or left turn pockets with a minimal disruption to downtown area. Now, the initial 64-foot wide streetscape section would have two 12-foot lanes, two 5-foot Class 2 bike lanes, two 1-foot buffers between bike lanes and the two 8-foot parking lanes. In addition, there would be two 6-foot sidewalks. Possible future restriping for a two-way left turn lane or turn pockets would result in one 12-foot wide two-way left turn lane or turn pockets, two 11-foot wide traveled lanes, two 5-foot bike lanes, one 8-foot parking lane on the west side of the highway, and two 6-foot wide sidewalks.
And you, in your handouts that you received, you've got both of these street mix. Yeah, Caltrans used street mix to illustrate how the cross section of the street would look under both the initial design and then in the future if it became necessary for a center turn lane. So you'll see the primary difference between the two handouts is that one includes parking on both sides and then one includes parking on one side with the center turn lane.
Now, due to the impacts to off-street parking along surf property footage from a 64-foot wide streetscape, two buildings on surf properties would need to be cut back approximately 6 feet to preserve surf market's off-street parking. The working group was in support of not having on-street parking north of Ocean Drive to allow for a left turn pocket for southbound traffic along Highway 1 turning left into Ocean Drive. A clear majority of Walla and Sea Ranch residents who attended the October 1st, 2019 public meeting supported a 64-foot wide streetscape width that would retain on-street parking on both sides of the highway. Now, this is a major change, and Caltrans has yet to develop the necessary alignments, determine what the impacts are, and what the actual cost for a relocation of utilities. So these numbers that I've included here are fairly rough. So I want to make sure that folks are aware of that. But right now, the total construction cost is $3.3 million for a 64-foot wide alternative, with construction support approximately at $1.3 million. MCOG's portion for construction cost is $1.8 million, current, $2.2 million escalated. And MCOG's portion of the construction support is $700,000, current, with $850,000 escalated. MCOG funds are needed for pavement widening, sidewalks, radar feedback signs, and pedestrian activated flashing signs. SHOP funds will be requested for the overlay drainage and pavement delineation. Right-of-way capital cost estimate is $600,000. Right-of-way support cost estimate $800,000, current, $960,000 escalated. MCOG's portion of the right-of-way capital is $325,000, current, $390,000 escalated. Right-of-way support $425,000, current, $510 escalated. Again, these are rough numbers. We do have quite a bit of work to do based on this new streetscape width, and utility relocation is going to be a big part of the streetscape construction. So I'll take questions.
And I want to point out that this item is just, it's an informational presentation today, an opportunity for board members to ask questions, but it is not on, there won't be any action on this today. There will be a funding request coming forward in the future when we consider the STIP funding for the 2020 RTIP. And there are community members here today that would like to provide comment as well.
Okay.
Are you looking for comments or just questions?
Comments or questions are always helpful.
I have a few comments. Okay. First of all, it was an excellent way to visualize this after having been there and listening to the comments of the various people. So thank you for this. This is a unique way to do it. My takeaway from that whole trip and from what you've just said is that we're trying to make this a walking-friendly town, not a traffic town, a walking-friendly and biking-friendly. So the diagram that shows the biking with the separation and the two sides for parking would solve a lot of the problems with the parking issue. I see no left turns and just no left turn allowed. If a person needs to go into the other side, they just need to plan accordingly and go to that side, but just park. I love the idea of the 6-foot sidewalks and biking. And so I think we should emphasize that as much as possible and not cause traffic jams with the left turn thing. Even if you did have a left turn lane, you still have traffic jams with, trying to get into a different parking lot. So if possible, to emphasize remote parking. So if you have big parking places that people can park at for free especially, but if not, oh well. And then be able to walk around would be really great.
Yeah, one thing
Just saying.
I'd like to add to that is left turns will not be disallowed. You'll still be able to turn left into parking areas. along the
I
street.
see left turns as being a big problem, even if you had a left turn lane.
Yeah. Many folks in the community said that they typically do not have to wait too long to turn left into other parking areas. That may not be the case. Go ahead.
Okay, so then the solution to that would be a roundabout somewhere where they could come down, do a turnaround, and come back, and no left turns.
We had a number of suggestions from community members that a roundabout at the south end of town would be a great benefit to slow down traffic as it was coming in the town.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to commend you, Mr. Demling, and the committee, the Walla committee, for coming to what seems to be a very reasonable compromise. My question is, the sidewalks originally were going to be somewhat meandering with plantings interspersed. Is that still on the table, or would that have to be eliminated?
That has to be eliminated at this point because of the parking. The alignment itself will be somewhat curvilinear, but we will not have a meandering sidewalk with either hardscape or landscaping areas.
I would just like to say that perhaps those plantings could be located on private property or in some other areas, it would sure make the town more welcoming, I think.
Many in the community did express that same sentiment, and we're looking to business owners and others in the community to see that happen.
And of course, a roundabout would provide that opportunity for more plantings too. So.
Definitely.
Okay, if there are no more comments from board members, let's open it up to the public.
Well, good afternoon. My name is George Provencher. I'm a resident of Gualala for the past 26 years. I participated in the working group and also the community meeting that we had last week that was sponsored by Caltrans and our good friend Frank here. One of the things I wanted to comment on was the process. In the working group, we had an excellent representation of business owners, property owners, and residents in Walla. It was a very good cross-section. The community meeting also had the same kind of representation. Businesses were well represented, particularly the businesses up and down Highway 1. And I think there was a large consensus that we needed to take into account the impacts on local businesses. I think the process that Frank developed with the working groups, with the community meeting was really excellent. It was a democratic process at work. We had overwhelming support for the plan that Frank just presented, not just in the working group, which by the way was unanimous, but for the community meeting, it was overwhelming. We had predominantly most of the people that packed that room, there were nearly 150 people, at least by my count, that participated and were very enthusiastic. I think it was a great process. I just want to say to Frank, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, George.
Do we have additional public comment? Come on up.
Afternoon. My name's John Bauer. I represent a large portion of the properties that will be impacted by the new streetscape. And as much as I really love the streetscape and how it's going to help our town, make our town look better, we still have some pretty severe problems with parking. And you talked briefly about maybe some off-site parking, and I've been trying to do that for quite a few months, and it seems like there are too many environmental blockades, Bishop Pine Forest, wetlands, and things like that, that may prevent us from doing off-site parking to take care of our tenants and the employees. Like the Surf Market has 40 to 50 employees, and that's 40 or 50 cars if there's one in a car. That isn't going to work with the current parking configuration, so we're going to have to change the entire Surf Market parcel. And according to what Frank has just alluded to, and I didn't learn until last week that he's talking about 6 feet being removed from 2 of our different buildings there in order for us just to keep the parking that's on our side of the road. So there's another problem, and that is that we've been parking cars out in the street for years, since back in the 60s. And Caltrans has only a prescriptive right out in the street. And when they look at moving over, taking some of the parking that's currently there onto other properties, there's going to be issues with how to maintain a sufficient number of parking places for the town, especially in the future. And I don't want to see this town have just 2 roundabouts and everybody goes down there turning right. I mean, that is a solution, but logging trucks and 65-foot long trucks are going to go very slowly through that. Delivery trucks, Surf Market has at least 5 or 6 of them in single day use down there. So what I'd like to see is that that Frank can come up with some other solutions to help us with the parking for our entire town's future. I feel that you folks have in your hands a wonderful document that can be utilized by the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors and you folks as a gateway to the North Coast. And my feelings are very strong about that gateway, and I believe a roundabout at the south end would help contribute to that, especially if it had some carefully crafted signage. So in that light, you know, I've looked at a couple of the transportation studies that were done. 95, I believe, was the first one, called for a stoplight at the south end of town at 501. Now we're kind of looking at a roundabout, and I think that's a very good traffic calming and organizing product. So in our community, there are still differences of opinions, and I'm going to have a really tough time with our properties, which are about 40% of the impacted businesses down the street, the frontage in the street. And if we can't find parking in the community, if we can't find parking outside the community, if we can't provide parking in the rest of the community, we're going to be hurting a lot. And some of you have heard about the GPD zoning, which is some of our property. And if it's not available, where are we going? Where's the future of this town? There are other streets that were considered early on, and I think are still considered in the town plan as alternates to keep the traffic off of Highway 1. And I would like to be still alive when people can drive from the ridge through the residential reserve into the east side of downtown Gualala without ever having to go out on Highway 1. A lot of things are loose here, and we don't really have a good driving group to bring some of these to fruition, and we're looking towards you folks to help us. We now will have a streetscape with 2 6-foot wide sidewalks. Those sidewalks stop at one end of town, actually before the end of town, and stop well in advance of the original streetscape total distance. So we've only done the core for a streetscape. There's some more that could be added up to the mobile home park, which is now Ocean View Estates, and they'd love to have it because we're looking at elderly folks, and I look around and I'm one of them, and the closer we can get to grocery stores, the more we need to look at the parking near the grocery stores. There are going to be carts out there in the sidewalk. Maybe, like we said, there could be a reasonable solution to that if the original owners or the owners of some of those parcels, especially those with markets, might do sidewalks on their own side of the property, quote, lined. Again, those sidewalks being meandering and having vegetation where they can, and the other issues that we have about lot coverage and things that don't make sense in the town plan still will have to be corrected. So I'm kind of at the forefront of correcting some of this, including dealing with planning and our supervisor to take a look at it. So this will be a long-term deal. I know Frank says this project is at least 3 years before breaking ground.
Correct.
3 years before breaking ground for the main part of the project. He may be able to get the drainage in, which is fabulous. There are issues with the drainage that we need to work out, and he and I need to work together to put some of those issues to bed. I appreciate your concerns and your desires to see this project move on. It has been a long time coming, and there have been really tough times with the other MCOG member who, Phil Dow, who ran this project for years trying to get it approved. I'd like to see it, adopted, but there are issues. And those issues are our property, our loss of parking. How is it going to be compensated? How is it going to be dealt with so we have sufficient parking in downtown? I had a comment from one of the Caltrans parties who came down from Eureka last meeting, and she said, every town I drove through had on-street parking. We have boats, we have motorhomes, we have people visiting the coast, we have they're mid-sized motorhomes, and we have a lot of other trailers that the contractors are pulling. If we lose our on-street parking, or they're designated fairly short, those folks won't be able to stop in town and grab a bite to eat, walk around, use the trail. Like I say, we still have a lot of concerns. So in that light, I think I'd probably better be quiet. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions you might have for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Doesn't look like any at this time. Okay.
Thank you.
I want to make just a couple follow-up comments, and I just want to make sure that the board knows that, Frank explained that this current plan would allow for future installation, restriping to allow for a center turn lane, but that's not planned at any time. It's not in the plans at this time. It just allows for that as a future option if it became necessary. So at this time and for the foreseeable future, on-street parking will remain in town. Caltrans is also looking into the possibility of paving. There's a dirt area along the west side of the highway at the south end of town that's currently owned by Caltrans. They're looking into the possibility of paving that area as additional potential parking for the town. And hopefully if that happened, it could include the installation of electric vehicle charging stations. So different options are, being considered to provide additional parking opportunities.
I might add just a little bit, and I understand that you folks have looked at the spacing between charging stations up and down the coast and kind of what's necessary, and I'd like to see 4 or 5 in town. I'd like for our restaurants to have charging stations, for a gas station as a last resort charging station, and obviously our stores and inns, because people will be parked overnight and they'll be parked there for a half an hour or better, and charging stations would be good. Some of the problems with charging stations is that they're built handicap, so they take up more parking. And in that light, it provides some difficulty for the property owners to be able to put them together. Thank you.
The next speaker, but before the next speaker comes up, I just wanted to mention Janet Orth is one of the key people coordinating the installation of electric charging stations throughout the county. And the good news is that Sonoma Clean Power just received a new grant from the Public Utilities Commission, where they're leveraging $1 from Sonoma Clean Power for I think $3 or $4 from the Public Utilities Commission for additional electric charging stations in Mendocino County. So if anybody has suggestions as to where in Mendocino County additional stations should go, and there are some that are still in the works from other grants that are not yet installed, they should contact Janet. One way to look at a map that's pretty up to date about where charging stations are currently located or proposed Visit Mendocino, the Mendocino County Tourism Commission does maintain a pretty accurate map of where they are installed in Mendocino County and where they're proposed, because obviously tourists coming to Mendocino County are looking for that information, and so that's just a good source if you want to see where they are or where they're proposed already. And Janet, do you have anything else to add to that?
Just to say that we updated the regional readiness plan in June of this year, and that's up on MCOG's website. And as you say, there is a Sonoma Clean Power program. They've got close to $7 million, I think, for incentives that can pay up to 80% of the cost of charging station installations at really a lot of eligible entities for that. That can be private businesses, nonprofits, public agencies. There's a lot of room in there. So that starts in 2020, October, I think a year from now. So we will be interested in hearing from anybody who's interested in that.
Right.
Nothing against Tesla, but I believe that the majority of hybrids, et cetera, are not Tesla. And there's a dirge, is that the right word, of charging stations, especially around here, for just the regular hybrids. And what they do in Fort Bragg, and I guess that's maybe standard, is they charge, it's free for the first hour, and then they charge you $1.50 an hour, which is about, for me, the cost of a gallon of, the same amount of gas. So, you have to think about it before you leave it in. And you don't want to keep paying and paying and paying. So the first hour, and then you move. You can't just park there all day.
Okay, thanks. Next comment.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Murphy from the Gualala Municipal Advisory Council, and I want to thank you for the hearing today. I especially want to extend my thanks to Nafili and to Frank, who has taken tireless phone calls, and I'm really impressed with the way he's brought our community together. I know this council has been working on this issue for 17 years, and I hope that we're coming to the end of the road. I'm here today to ask for your support, to urge your support for these badly needed roadway and safety improvements in Walla. The road surface is in poor shape, making it hazardous to pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. The proposal before you will achieve 2 of the 4 major safety goals that have been in our town plan for 17 years, and will be of particular benefit to our seniors, our children, our visitors, and our businesses. It will also leave the path open to other safety improvements in the future. On my motion, GMAC has voted to support this plan 5-0, with the understanding from Caltrans that individual property owners in the future will be able to opt out of on-highway parking for safety and/or aesthetic reasons. Personally, I've noticed a particular preference for the hospitality owners who emphasize aesthetics of curb appeal over the retail owners who have accented parking as an issue. I'd like to address, because this is an informational meeting, a couple of the questions that came up earlier. Ms. Alvin Smith, you asked about existing parking. There are existing 20 parking lots in the project area with a total capacity in excess of 600 spaces. The on-highway parking through the town, I'm not sure the exact total number you could squeeze in there, but most of it goes unused most of the time. Generally speaking, there are between 12 and, on the high end, 24 cars parked on the highway, mostly in the downtown area between the hotel and the supermarket down there. The roundabout is great.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Are they parallel or diagonal?
The existing park, on highway or off highway? The on highway are all parallel. No, that's not true. There's some spaces in front of the hotel that are perpendicular.
Okay.
In which case the cars back out into the highway currently. And the ding on the parallel parking, of course, is that when you're pulling out of certain driveways and there's a car parked there, your visibility and sight lines are cut. There are also, you asked about left turns. By my count, and this may not be totally accurate, Frank would have the better measurement, about 18 curb cuts and driveways in the project area, which is just in the heart of the downtown area, permitting as many as 36 left turn opportunities. A lot of these go into smaller businesses that are often neglected by our visitors because we don't have sidewalks to walk around. I think in the future, I'm not pushing for a left turn lane here. It's not part of this compromise, but I wanted you to have that information. And in the future, I could see opportunities for those businesses growing as people walk and bike through the town. The question about landscaping, I think Mr. Wasserman asked. The sidewalks now will not have landscaping. However, there is another possibility. I mentioned that we'd like to see individual property owners have the opportunity to put bump outs instead of parking spaces in front of their businesses at their option. And the reason for that is, one of my concerns is whether Gualala is really ready for this dramatic a change. I don't think it really is. And really, I think that would give the town a sense on a few occasions of what that would look like, how it would change the look of the town. It would phase this in over a period of time. And at some time in the future, the town may decide to go a different way due to operational reasons or an accident or something else, or other developmental changes. Again, on my motion, GMAC has voted 5-0 to support this plan. And I stand before you again asking for your strong support as you go past this informational meeting and into your funding considerations. This is something we've been waiting for 17 years and need very badly in Gualala. And I'm very proud of my town for coming together at a time where our nation is so torn apart to come to a really challenging compromise that I don't think anybody in Gualala is completely happy with all of it, but together we are happy with all of it. Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment on this item?
Hello, my name's Steve May, and I've met a couple of you, I think, in the past. I'm the owner of Surf Market in Walla. Couple of comments. I wonder, just Frank, if you could address the idea that some business owners or property owners would be able to sort of opt in or opt out of various elements of the plan. I don't want a bike path in front of my place, but I don't want stripes on the road in front of my place.
Well, there's not going to be an option on bike paths. That will be continuous through town. As far as the parking opting out in the future, I think that's something that individual business owners should have the option for, but not at the expense of other businesses. I think, as we saw in this case, if there are individuals in the community that are opposed to that, it will definitely come up, and there may be a change.org petition. We don't want to get into another contentious debate, so I would hope that any decision in the future for businesses to opt out could be done so in a collaborative effort so it doesn't impact local businesses, but individual businesses would have that option if there was adequate parking available.
Okay. So, am I correct in that each of you is aware that this has been a project that's been going on for 15 plus years in Walla? There's been a lot of work done on this, and I think it's important to point out Mr. Youngling, who is here today, that you probably all know, chair of GMAC, is really credited with carrying this through for all of those years, and I think he deserves our appreciation for his work. There has really only been, I mean, there are elements of the community who object to the center turn lane or who don't like bike lanes or whatever, but really the reason that the community really came to a grinding halt on a compromise is around the issue of parking. And that has been the sticking point, and over the years, people have retired or even died or moved away that have worked on this. It's ground on so long, and Richie, you know, this has been an issue in our local town that's been very tricky to agree upon. Frank, Frank is credited with us even coming to an agreement. It was very contentious and very public discussion. A lot of people had opposing views on this, and the fact that we have arrived at a compromise that we can hopefully stand, arm in arm, saying that opposing parties are agreed in supporting this plan is very important. And we do want the funding, we do want the project, and we do think that it's going to make the community overall a benefit to the community, more walkable, more bikeable, safer, and also a benefit to the businesses. My business would probably be one of the one or two that would be most negatively impacted by the removal of parking. In my case, according to grocery industry experts, I'm running about 20 or 21 spots below what I should have already. And the removal of on-street parking would push that to about another 25 to 35 spots short, which would be almost certainly the end of my business. And that's a 63-year running supermarket that I think a lot of people expressed that they would like to see that asset remain in the community, functioning and thriving. All in, just in that immediate downtown core that many of you toured, the Gualala Hotel, Red Stella Surf Market, some of the businesses right next door to Surf Market. You're talking about 100 livelihoods, people who have invested in their businesses or who are trying to support their families with their jobs. And so I think, Frank and Nafili, you would agree that the community overwhelmingly said, don't take the parking off the street. And I think what you see with Mr. Murphy mentioning, that some businesses could opt in or out is kind of trying to wiggle out of an agreement that was reached. I don't think that you should support that. I don't think you should support that. And I think that what it kind of does is it kicks the can down the road so we get to continue in sort of an acrimonious tone rather than settling this issue once and for all. The compromise that we reach clearly states that the parking will remain on both sides of Highway 1 until such time as an operational need is determined. And according to Frank, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've said that may be decades down the road. It's another generation of owners or, your children that we're talking about. It's not something we're contemplating that would be triggered anytime in our imagination. And I think that should be off the table, frankly. I think that what you do by allowing a business to opt in or out is it just you keep an issue that has been extremely contentious, that has been overwhelmingly opposed by the community. And just to remind you, that change.org petition was started by me. There was over 1,170 signatures, 80 letters, a zillion phone calls. Emails, I think it was, did you reach approximately 1 billion emails? And they were overwhelmingly opposed to the notion of removal of on-street parking. And I think we need to put this matter to bed. And the compromise, the actual compromise, is that it is on the table at such time when there's an operational change that Frank has indicated. And let's stop talking about it so we can really join arms and make this happen for Gualala, which I think everybody's going to benefit from. So thank you so much for listening to me, and also definitely recognition for Frank and his work, for Nafili, and for Mr. Youngling.
Thank you.
I would just make sure any of the speakers who have not signed in, be sure to do so, please.
So that's right. It's not a public hearing, but it's always helpful to have the
Right,
names.
just for our records. While people are signing in, I'll take the chance to echo what some people have already said, that Frank has been a real asset. Frank and the rest of his team at Caltrans have been just phenomenal in bringing the community together, and the community members have really done a wonderful job and been able to accept that they had to, compromise, give up some of what they wanted in order to come up with something that worked for the community as a whole. So it's been nice to see that process.
Good day. My name is Robert Youngling. I'm the chairman of the Walla Municipal Advisory Council. I've been with GMAC. I think I'm the longest standing member now since 2003. We've been working on the Streetscape since 05, 06. So I'm literally kind of exhausted about this whole topic, but I'm just so happy that we came to a consensus this past week. And our mastermind here, Frank Demling, came up with so many different options, and we all as a community were fortunate enough to keep the project on the table and on the books by coming to a consensus that day. Like everybody was saying, there was we've never had a bigger meeting in our little town of Walla, and that's through many other, or a couple other infrastructure projects that we've had over the years, one being a sewer project, one being a utility undergrounding project. So I'm not gonna stay here and belabor here the whole thing, but I'm just happy that MCOG over all the years, prior to Nafili, it was Phil Dow, but that they've given us so much support in our little community. A lot of times locals feel like we're not well enough represented at the south end of the county, but this is a big project that we're gonna need for our future in Walla. There's still some concerns, yes, safety and the circulation of how this is all gonna work, but overall, I'm glad we've gotten past this next hurdle. Some have said, oh, we'd like to see the meandering walkways. It's more representative of a town on the coast. It would have been a unique thing to have, but we at least came to some kind of a meeting of the minds, and hopefully we can further it from there. So thank you, MCOG, and thanks for hearing me out.
Since my name came up, I thought I'd come back and address that. As far as that opt-out thing on the parking, I'll defer to Mr. Demling on that. I don't want to open any new wounds in this. It was part of the discussions of the working group. Our public hearing was somewhat chaotic, and I'm not sure we crossed all the T's or dotted all the I's, but I agree with Mr. Demling's position on that.
Okay, any other public comment on this item? Come on up.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Ducato, and I'm the marketing director at Surf Market. Thank you for having us all here today. I am probably one of the newer members to this issue that existed long before I moved to Gualala. But I have been at Steve's side since July when this issue surfaced again. I will say that working at Surf Market, I have relearned one of the reasons I love living in Gualala. Surf Market supports probably 50 to 75 farmers, local farmers, organic farmers through Mendocino County. And we also support a number of organizations within Gualala: Coastal Seniors, RCMS, Gualala Arts, the Lighthouse, and countless others. I will say that the other night was the first time at a GMAC meeting that I heard the words opt out. It had not been brought up before. I wrote it in my notes, I circled it. I talked to several other people who were in the meeting, and it comes as a complete surprise, because in front of a room of 175 people, this was never shared as an option to the community. And it is my strong belief that that would have raised a lot of red flags for people in our community who thought they were going down a track where there was agreement about keeping on-street parking. So I ask of you to acknowledge that, to understand where we got to the other night on Tuesday with 175 people coming to an agreement with no ifs, ands, buts, or opts, outs. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any more public comments? Okay, not seeing any more board comments.
Just a quick question to Mr. Demling. When you mentioned operational changes, just exactly what, for the future, what might that be?
A high volume of traffic, increase in the annual or average daily traffic. If there were significant delays for vehicles to turn left into businesses that had parking facilities available. At that point in time, the community and Caltrans and MCOG would sit down and collaboratively discuss the need for left turn pockets or a continuous two-way left turn lane. I look at the opt-out as something else that would have to be discussed by the community, MCOG and Caltrans. I do want to at least acknowledge that the individual businesses certainly have expressed that that's an option that they would like to have in the future. But I think Caltrans, as in the case of coming up with this agreed on alternative, needs to be sensitive to the local business needs. And I definitely do not want to see local businesses suffer as a result of loss of on-street parking. But of course, there are responsibilities that individual business owners have to provide parking and not rely on the state to do so. But if there were a need based on some operational requirement, then Caltrans would sit with the community and determine if it made more sense to go with a two-way left turn lane that would be continuous, or if left turn pockets would be the better way to go. But again, that is something that we see way off in the future. There are quite a few changes that would need to take place on several of the properties in Gualala in order to provide adequate parking for those businesses. So for now, I don't see that in the near future there being any operational need to include two-way left turn lane or left turn pockets until such time as the community, MCOG, and Caltrans believe it's necessary.
So, thank you. Frank, just to follow up to that, so you said that the current traffic volumes average daily trips doesn't warrant the turn pockets yet. It may not for many years. Could you do you have the rough numbers of what the average daily trips?
I don't have the rough numbers. We have a traffic count station at mile 4, which is just north of Walla, so we don't, and we are going to put another traffic count station at the south end. It's difficult to really say how many vehicles come in from the south and turn around and head back south and don't cross that count station further on north. So we don't have accurate numbers, but based on just anecdotal evidence coming from the community, most have told me that it's very seldom they need to wait 15, 20 seconds before turning left. Now that's most of the time. I'm sure on those weekends where you have special events, or you have a high volume of traffic, that is probably going to be a little bit longer. But at this point, does it justify installing a two-way left turn lane at the expense of on-street parking? I would say no, because of the harm it would do to local businesses.
And I would just say the anecdotal observations I have just from the few times I've been down in Walla, usually at meetings, usually walking along Main Street, that I would say, yeah, the traffic that I observed wasn't all that high a volume that you couldn't easily just turn left even if you had to wait. And actually, it's sort of a traffic calming feature in that if someone is stopped ahead of you to turn left, that slows you down as you approach that vehicle. And so as people are driving through town at a slower speed, they're actually more likely to see a business, see the sign, and go, oh, let's turn in over there. So I think it's probably actually going to be a positive for all the businesses downtown if people drive through town a little bit slower.
Is it okay for me to make another comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, two things. Just to be clear, I'm not sure if it was made clear that one of the center turn lane is generally unpopular on its own right, I would say. And do you think that's a fair characterization?
I think that's fair to say.
But the real contention there is that in order to make room for a center turn lane, you would have to remove parking. So it was one or the other. And that's really what I think the compromise was about. But there's another reason that I just want to argue in favor of retention of on-street parking, and it has to do with the character of the town. And it's what I believe, but it's also what I heard as I was working this issue over the last 8 weeks from numerous people, is that they had real concerns about the difference between a small downtown shopping district and the on-street parking and the sort of intimacy and the signal that it sends to you when there is on-street parking and a lot of activity and sort of congestion versus a bypass. And I think people had concerns about the removal of parking and how it would give the impression of an actual wider highway, even though it may not be physically wider. And then the center turn lane also creating that sense of a bypass rather than a place to stop and shop. So thank you for listening.
So I think in a way we were saying sort of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, any other board comments at this time? This was just a presentation. What else would MCOG staff or Caltrans like to let us know about what our next steps are?
So we are, today actually is the due date for funding requests as part of the 2020 RTIP. Staff will be gathering those. And then the Technical Advisory Committee will be considering all the requests received, which we will be considering a request for this project, and then local agencies have had the opportunity to submit requests as well. Those will be considered by the TAC, and the TAC's recommendation will be brought back to the MCOG board as part of a draft RTIP at the November meeting, with final action planned for December, in time to submit our final RTIP by the December 15th due date.
So just two questions. Who would be the sponsoring agency requesting the additional funds for this project? And secondly, do we have a fund estimate for the RTIP in total?
Yes, so this is a Caltrans implemented project. And MCOG, partially MCOG funded. Caltrans will be funding part of it as well. So shared funding, but implemented by Caltrans. And the fund estimate was 3.2? 3.2?
Yeah, but that's before you take out the PPM allocation.
Yeah, so the
It's
total.
actually- It's in your minutes, actually. From the previous meeting.
Yeah, so total fund estimate is 3.2 million. That's our target. There is, they also provide a maximum funding amount, which I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But that would extend into future years. So the target for the 5-year period is 3.2 million, approximately.
Okay. Any more questions before we go to consent calendar?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just when you're laying out the cost for this, when you say that it's 1.8 million current and 2.2 million escalated, the escalated just means the inflationary cost?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for the detailed presentation and I would say very cordial and informed comments from the public. And thank you for driving all the ways over here from the South Coast.
Yes.
From Los Angeles.
Or from Los Angeles. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go on to our consent calendar.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the minutes of August 19th, 2019. We have approval of the fiscal year 1920 budget amendment to include the California State of Good Repair Program, Mendocino Transit Authority's Ucae Transit Center project. And we also have approval of the second amendment to the fiscal year 1920 overall work program, award of a fiscal audit, auditor engagement for MCOG and Mendocino Transit Authority for fiscal years 18-19 through 22-23, and appointments to the Transit Productivity Committee for the senior center representatives. Any discussion on the consent calendar, or is there a motion to approve?
I move
To approve.
Second that.
Did you get that?
3 people seconded it.
I think Tess seconded it there. So, okay. All right, we have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Do we need to also do this by roll call because of the phone? Okay.
All right, Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Stransky?
Yes, sir.
Director Wasserman?
Yes.
Director Albin Smith?
Yes.
Director Haschak?
yes.
Director Medham?
Yes.
Director Carter?
Yes.
And Chair Dirty.
Yes. Okay. All right.
I'd just like to say for the record, I tried to send my alternate, and he said he was going to come, but apparently he didn't, so darn. I know I was going to be gone, so.
Okay.
It still counts against you.
Okay. So now we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee and reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Do we have a motion to ratify as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency?
I will so move.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
You have to do roll call because there's someone on the phone.
Even though
Everything.
even though Brad's not voting.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Wasserman? Yes. Albin Smith?
Yes.
Haschak?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
And Dirty?
Yes. All right. Well, thanks. Now we're on to reports. Mendocino Transit Authority. I don't see anyone. I mean, a couple of us are on the MTA board, but I don't know if there's really anything to say. We heard, I think, comment about the senior center process that I think is working its way through in a positive way. So I think that's settling down.
Yeah, and we're, MCOG staff is working on improving some processes to streamline sort of the reporting for the senior centers to make things easier for senior centers and MTA.
So I think the net result we'll all have better data about the ridership at the senior centers, and it may well show that the ridership is less expensive at the senior centers than was previously reported at MTA meetings.
Correct.
And, okay, all right, then is there, I don't know, Loretta, is there any news from the North Coast Rail Authority?
No, they canceled their last meeting, so no report.
Okay, thank you. And MCOG staff, we have your summary of meetings. Is there anything you want to highlight on that?
I know unless there are any questions.
Okay, for administrative staff, any verbal report you'd like to give?
Yeah, I would just like to take a moment to introduce board members to MCOG's newest employee. This is Danielle Casey. So Danielle has filled the project coordinator position. She's got a background as transportation planner with Caltrans and has done project management in the private sector. So we are very happy to have her on board. And your local agency representatives will be working with her, TAC members and local agencies. So welcome, Danielle.
Okay, thank you. Does that bring us to planning staff?
Yes, I'd like to update you on the grant for the Fire Vulnerability Assessment and Emergency Evacuation Preparedness Plan. So we are almost through with the procurement process. We sent out the RFP and we received 5 proposals, which were reviewed about a week ago by a committee made up of representatives from the CEO's office, the Sheriff's office, the OES office, the Department of Transportation, as well as Caltrans and MCOG. So we had a 6-member, we feel like we had a very good review committee reviewing the 5 proposals, and there was a unanimous recommendation of the top proposal, and we are right now in the contracting process with that, but we wanted to let you know that that project's getting off the ground.
Okay. Do we have any reports from directors?
Just one. I mean, just one for me. But last week, I attended a meeting that Senator Mcguire came to and was explaining what he was doing, what he's up to. And I made a comment regarding the fact that MTA did not get their electric bus in a grant, and that's another story. But that just kind of brings up the whole issue of how can we get our state government to assist with solar electric setups, which we already have at MTA, and buses for our regional transportation and school districts. And so I will have a conversation with Taylor, his assistant, his legislative assistant, this afternoon, actually, after this meeting, and I'm looking for any input that you would like me to convey for Senator Mcguire to potentially start a bill or something that would help us, other than just these federal grants. The EPA has some serious restrictions to a lot of these, and it's highly competitive nationwide. So my point is that rural communities often don't have the option to walk or bicycle to things out of town, or whereas big cities have everything. So we're not that competitive with the big cities. We may not be as sophisticated in terms of our setup. Not to say that we don't have an excellent setup, but it may not as competitive. So I'd like the low income, low opportunity type of areas to get a fair shake in terms of solar electric, and this might be a big feather in the cap of the governor and those involved in terms of lowering greenhouse gas emissions. Any input is welcome.
I'll just add that for that particular program, there were no rural projects awarded funding at all. So not just MTA, but none of the rural applicants were successful.
Thank you for that.
Director Hashak?
Yes, I had a question about the Covelo project, and if there's any news on it, any progress being made. It's always a big question up there about what's going on.
Well, we are continuing to move through the processes. Our right-of-way consultant has been actually making very good progress, and we're moving through the project as quickly as we can. We still are hoping to start construction next year. There's some unknowns about whether that will be possible, but we're hopeful that that's an option. Do you want to give any more information?
Sounds about good.
Yes, we will probably be coming to the board in the next couple of months and asking for formation of an ad hoc committee to address issues with that project as they come up, or if they come up. We've used the executive committee in the past, but we thought that it might make sense to form an ad hoc committee for that, specific to that project.
Thank you.
And I'm betting Director Hashak would be volunteering to be on that ad
I
hoc.
thought he might, yes.
Okay, so do we have any CalCog reports? If we don't, we can adjourn at 2:47. Okay, we're adjourned.
We'll see you in November.
Thank you.